Just when I think that maybe I've learned everything there is to know about digital transformation, the new year comes upon us and I realize that I have not, in fact, learned everything there is to know about transformation. So what are those things that I learned in 2021? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And in the last year, I've had the good fortune of interacting with hundreds of different organizations that are going through digital transformations. And in that time, dealing with all these different organizations going through massive amounts of change, I found that I still have not figured out everything there is to know about digital transformation. And I don't know that I ever will, which is what makes consulting fun and which makes my job so fun. So what I want to talk about today are what are those top things that I learned in 2021 that I didn't know going into the new year, or maybe that I just understand better now that I did prior to this year. One of the things that became crystal clear to me in 2021, even more so than in 2020, is just how much digital transformation is being forced on organizations throughout the world. Some of them are doing it by choice. They want to get ahead strategically. They want to have a competitive advantage going into the new year or going into the 2020s. But I'd say a majority of organizations are being forced, either because the economy in the world is changing, because government regulations are changing, consumer behavior is changing, and or, probably most importantly, software vendors are changing. And in many cases, software vendors are forcing a sunset of their legacy products, which is forcing a lot of organizations into their transformations. So when you add up all those different things that could cause an organization to be forced into a transformation, you can see how easy it is for a majority to be in that situation. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have from this year, is that I don't know when this will end, if it'll end, but for the time being, where we are right now in time, digital transformation is a necessity for a lot of organizations. So while I just got done saying that a lot of organizations are being forced into change, and in many cases going through massive changes, there's a lot in the industry that still has not changed, and I would have expected to change by now. In fact, I have a whole video on this exact topic, but I'll summarize some of those things here today. For example, focus on organizational change management, or lack thereof. That's something that still has not changed. You look at things like project management, that hasn't changed or improved materially over the last few years. A lack of focus on business process improvement, that hasn't changed much over the last few years. And in short, the reasons that digital transformations fail largely have not changed, not just in 2021, but into the years and decades leading up to 2021. So at some point you figure that has to change, but it still hasn't. And I'm still surprised each and every year that goes by that we as an industry haven't yet figured out how to make digital transformations more successful, or at the very least, just stop failing in the digital transformations. Just have an okay digital transformation as sort of the average. And that's a problem in the industry. And I think until we figure that out, that's going to be a drag on the digital transformation space. With the amount of change happening in society, the economy, with consumers, with your suppliers, with supply chains, with government regulations, all that stuff, that means that flexibility is more important than ever. And working with so many organizations throughout the world that are struggling to keep up with all the changing demands around them, all the curveballs coming their way, all the unexpected changes to their worlds, it's fascinating to me how much organizations are changing and how flexibility and agility is so important. Now, I hear industry analysts and software vendors talking about agility all the time, and I think most of you listening to this may have heard that term commonly as well. But really understanding the magnitude and what's driving that need for agility is one of the biggest lessons I have today. And it really helps me empathize with organizations throughout the world and digital transformation teams throughout the world, because there's just so much they're trying to juggle and balance as part of their transformations that it makes their jobs very difficult. So that's one of the biggest takeaways from this year as well. Now, one of my predictions for 2021 was that supply chain management would be a very important factor, an important driver for change. Turns out that that was true, and we're seeing and feeling the impacts of supply chain issues throughout the world as we speak. So that in and of itself isn't a surprise, but I guess what's a surprise to me is the magnitude and how correct that prediction was. It's even more extreme than I would have thought, as far as how difficult supply chain management is, how difficult it is for organizations to manage their supply chains and optimize their supply chains and just keep their supply chains functioning. So it's really a good eye-opener and a good understanding of how interconnected supply chains are and how much it takes to make an effective supply chain and just as importantly, how difficult it can be to transform your supply chain to adapt to the 2020s. Now, another prediction I had for 2021, which was sort of true, but not completely true, is that I assumed that human capital management would become a very important consideration for organizations going through change and transformation in 2021. Now, that's sort of true, but I didn't realize how big the labor shortages would be, how difficult it would be for organizations to retain employees. I was approaching it more from the perspective of how do you help people make sure they feel healthy and are dealing with health concerns and their safety and that sort of thing. I think that's still top of mind for a lot of organizations, a lot of employees. But what's even more important, more fundamental, is just, are you providing a workplace and an environment that people want to work? And how can you keep the people that you have right now? That's always been a concern for organizations, but it's especially true now with the labor shortages that many industries and geographies are facing. And it's something that I think will continue into 2022. So that's one of the biggest lessons I have from 2021, is just how important HR, human capital management, employee experience, all that stuff is so critical to organizations to be successful in the 2020s. With each year that goes by, I always think that technology is changing as fast as it could possibly change. But each year that goes by, technology changes faster than it did the year before. And you look at all the advances in machine learning and Industry 4.0, smart factories, Internet of Things, all that stuff. There's just so much good technology out there. And it's mostly good news. It's great to see all these new technologies, but it's also a stark reminder that technology is always going to be changing faster, and it's always going to be accelerating faster than organizations and people can. So at what point does that divide become too big? I don't know the answer to that. But what it does also remind us is that we don't necessarily need to keep up with technology. We don't necessarily need to adapt all that technology today, even though vendors may suggest that we can and should. So it's really important to really understand and cherry pick where technology can best support your business in the 2020s and beyond. One of the biggest lessons I have from 2021 was when I took a trip to Germany to speak at a conference late in the year. And at that ERP conference, I learned a lot about different software vendors that were specializing in the German market. And while we have international locations at Third Stage, we have an office in London that services our European market. We have an office in Brisbane that services our Asia Pacific office, and we're in the process of opening an office in Africa. So we're very familiar with the global landscape, but even looking within Europe, it was fascinating to see how different the German ERP market is relative to the rest of Europe and relative to the rest of the world. So it was a good reminder, not just for people in Germany or Europe, but just wherever you are in the world. It's really important to recognize that what I may say is sort of a global leading solution may or may not be a good fit for your geography, not just in terms of the presence that that software vendor has, but also in terms of the technical competencies and the functional competencies within your market. So even if the software vendor has a footprint or an office in your country or location, you also want to make sure that there's others in the ecosystem that can support that technology. So that was one of the biggest lessons I had as well, is that there's a lot of unevenness and a lot of disparity throughout the world on the levels of technical competencies throughout the world. Sort of a summary takeaway and lesson for me in 2021 is just how much I don't know and how I'm nowhere near knowing everything there is to know about digital transformation. And that's, again, what makes this fun, but it also makes it very difficult for those of us in the digital transformation space. And it's that much more important for us to stay on top of current trends, to always look outside our own knowledge base or our own team's knowledge base, look outside our organization to figure out what are the best ways for us to make our digital transformation successful. So there is a lot I don't know, but if you do want to know the things I do know, I wanted to invite you to download some of the materials I've included links to below. I've included a lot of guides and best practices and videos and podcasts and things of that nature that are meant to share my knowledge and share our team's knowledge around digital transformation to help you be more successful in your transformation journey. So I encourage you to download those materials, check us out there, check us out on social media as well, and we'll be happy to share with you what we don't know, and we'll also share with you what we're learning as we go as well. So I hope you found this information useful. I hope you have a great day.